The US-China trade war is redrawing the global energy map forever. China just axed 90% of US oil imports overnight. But it's not chaos. It's a master plan to crown Canada as the new energy king. The world is a grand arena, and the US and China are gladiators clashing in an economic coliseum. Their trade war, erupting in 2022, has escalated from a skirmish over semiconductors and soybeans into a global power struggle that threatens to fracture the world economy. The appointment of Li Changgang as China's international trade negotiator in 2025 is a clarion call. Beijing is gearing up for a protracted, no-holds-barred fight. This isn't a mere policy tweak. It's a seismic shift, signaling China's resolve to counter America's economic offensive with equal ferocity. The Trump administration, brandishing its America First doctrine like a battle standard, has unleashed a tariff onslaught. Tariffs of 245% on Chinese imports have turned markets upside down, transforming a $1 product into a $3.45 burden in the blink of an eye. These aren't just numbers. They're economic sledgehammers designed to crush China's export-driven growth. Imagine a chessboard where every move is a gambit. The US is sacrificing pawns to corner China's king, but Beijing is no novice player. China's response is swift and surgical. By targeting America's energy sector, its oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG, Beijing is striking at the heart of US economic power. Energy isn't just a commodity. It's the lifeblood of modern economies, and China is choking off America's flow. In 2022, the US exported 3.6 million barrels of crude oil per day to China, a lifeline for American producers. Now, China has slashed these imports by 90%, redirecting its energy appetite to Canada and other players. LNG shipments from the US have plummeted to near zero, a stunning reversal from the robust trade of a few years ago. This isn't a fleeting spat. It's a tectonic shift in global energy dynamics. The world's energy trade routes are being redrawn, with Canada emerging as China's new partner and the US left grappling with a fractured market. To unravel this high-stakes drama, we must explore the roots of this conflict and the forces driving this global realignment. The trade war is a storm, and its winds are reshaping the future. The energy sector is now a war zone in the US-China trade clash. The US lost 90% of its oil market to China in a flash. But Canada's not just filling the gap, it's stealing the throne. Picture the global energy market as a vast river system, with oil and gas flowing like currents between nations. For years, the US was a mighty tributary, feeding China, the world's most ravenous energy consumer, with affordable crude oil and LNG. During 2017 to 2018, China imported millions of barrels of US oil and signed landmark LNG deals, powered by America's shale revolution. This was a golden era of mutual gain. US producers found a booming market, and China bridged its massive energy deficit. There were even talks of Chinese investments in US LNG facilities, a sign of deepening economic ties. But the trade war has turned this river into a raging torrent. The US imposed crippling tariffs on Chinese goods, prompting Beijing to retaliate with 25 to 30% tariffs on American oil and LNG. These tariffs are economic chokeholds, making US energy prohibitively expensive. Whispers from Beijing suggest an even darker strategy. State-owned Chinese firms have been directed to avoid enriching an unfriendly nation, effectively boycotting US energy. The impact is catastrophic. US oil, once a bargain for Chinese refiners, is now priced out, unable to compete with cheaper, politically safer alternatives from Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Canada. Canada, the quiet giant to the north, has seized this opportunity with both hands. Bloomberg reports that China's crude oil imports from Canada have surged to historic highs in 2025, doubling in a mere 3 months. Canada's heavy oil, extracted from the Western Canadian Sedimentary Basin, offers stable supply and lower geopolitical risk. Chinese refiners are gobbling it up, drawn by competitive prices and Canada's expanding production capacity. This isn't a minor market shift, it's a geopolitical earthquake. The US, once the king of China's energy imports, is watching its throne usurped by a northern rival. The stakes are global. Energy markets are in turmoil, with prices swinging wildly as supply chains realign. The US, once a beacon of energy abundance, is now a bystander in China's energy strategy, and the ripple effects are reshaping alliances and economies worldwide. To understand why Canada has become China's new darling, we need to dig deeper. China's dumping US oil for Canada, rewriting energy history. Canada-Chinese oil imports from Canada doubled in 90 days. This isn't just a trade switch, it's China building an energy empire. Imagine China as a master strategist, orchestrating a global energy chess game with precision. The 90% drop in US oil imports isn't just a reaction to tariffs. It's a deliberate move to diversify and dominate. Canada, with its vast oil reserves and stable politics, is China's knight in this high-stakes match. Chinese importers have nearly doubled their Canadian oil purchases in 2025, capturing market share once dominated by American producers. But what makes Canada the chosen one in this energy pivot? First, there's economics. Canadian heavy oil is competitively priced, especially compared to US oil burdened by tariffs and logistical bottlenecks. While US oil struggles with high transportation costs and diplomatic friction, Canada offers a cost-effective alternative. Second, there's reliability. Canada is a low-risk partner, free from the diplomatic volatility that defines US-China relations. Unlike the US, where trade wars and political rhetoric create uncertainty, Canada is a steady hand, making it a safe bet for China's long-term energy needs. Third, there's capacity. Canadian producers are scaling up, with ambitious plans for new pipelines, terminals, and tank farms on the Pacific coast to feed Asia's insatiable demand. These infrastructure projects aren't just pipe dreams. They're a signal of Canada's commitment to becoming a global energy player. China is already negotiating medium-term supply guarantees with Canadian firms, accelerating these projects to secure a steady flow of oil. This is a marriage of convenience and ambition, with China's demand fueling Canada's rise. The numbers are stark. The U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, reports that China's 90% cut in U.S. oil imports translates to a loss of hundreds of thousands of barrels per day. This is a dagger to the heart of American producers, particularly in Texas and Louisiana, where oil towns are reeling from lost revenue. Meanwhile, China is securing Russian oil at discounts of $10 to $12 per barrel, a windfall driven by Western sanctions and Moscow's need for buyers. Add Canada's stable supply to the mix, and China is crafting a multi-alternative energy network that renders the US irrelevant. This pivot is more than economic. It's a geopolitical power play. China is sending a message. It can thrive without American energy, weakening the US while strengthening ties with Canada and Russia. For Canada, this is a once-in-a-century opportunity. If China locks in long-term contracts, Canada could transform from a regional supplier to a global energy titan, reshaping trade routes and alliances for generations. The trade war has obliterated US LNG exports to China forever. China's LNG imports from the US are now virtually zero. But China's not stranded. It's forging gas empires with Russia and Australia. LNG, the cleaner cousin of oil, is another battlefield in this trade war. The US, riding the crest of its shale gas revolution, was a rising star in the LNG market, doubling exports in just 5 years. In 2021, China overtook Japan as the world's largest LNG importer, relying heavily on US shipments to power its industries and heat its homes during brutal winters. This was a symbiotic relationship. American producers tapped into China's booming demand, and China secured a reliable supply to fuel its growth. But the trade war has frozen this partnership in its tracks. China's 25 to 30% tariffs on US LNG, coupled with a near-zero purchase policy, have reduced exports to a trickle. The New York Times paints a grim picture. US LNG cargoes destined for China are being diverted or canceled, dealing a body blow to companies banking on export growth. The fallout is immediate. American LNG producers, once poised to dominate global markets, are now scrambling to find buyers, their ambitions thwarted by Beijing's calculated retaliation. Europe, a potential lifeline, is no panacea. High US LNG prices and political hesitations, amplified by the Russia-Ukraine crisis, limit Europe's appetite. European buyers, wary of over-reliance on US gas and facing competition from cheaper suppliers, are picking and choosing their deals. Meanwhile, China is aggressively courting alternative suppliers, deepening ties with Russia, Qatar, and even Australia to secure LNG. This isn't just a market shift, it's a deliberate snub to the US, designed to hit where it hurts. Canada, though a US ally, is quietly capitalizing on the chaos. Canadian LNG companies are eyeing China's demand, prioritizing profit over diplomatic loyalty. The Canadian government, sidestepping geopolitical quicksand, calls this a private sector matter, but the subtext is clear. In the energy trade, money talks louder than alliances. The global LNG landscape is fracturing, and the US, once a frontrunner, is losing ground to rivals who play the game with fewer strings attached. For China, this is about resilience, building a supply chain that can withstand any storm Washington unleashes. The US-China trade war is shaking global energy markets to their core. Canada's stealing China's energy market from the US. But nobody's safe. Prices are spiraling, and the world's on edge. This trade war is a global hurricane, and its winds are reshaping economies far beyond US and Chinese borders. China's pivot to Canada could forge a new energy corridor, elevating Canada's economic and diplomatic clout to unprecedented heights. With billions invested in Pacific Coast infrastructure, new terminals, pipelines, and storage facilities, Canada is positioning itself as Asia's go-to energy supplier. If China signs multi-year contracts, Canada could leap from underdog to energy superpower, redrawing the global trade map and cementing its place as a geopolitical heavyweight. For the US, the loss of China's market is a crippling blow. American exporters are desperately pivoting to Europe and Latin America, but the terrain is hostile. Middle Eastern producers, Russia, and African nations already dominate these markets, offering lower prices and entrenched networks. US oil companies are grappling with higher transportation costs and razor-thin margins, with producers in Texas and Louisiana pointing fingers at Trump's tariffs. Trump's defiance, "They're exploiting America," may rally his base, but it's a high-stakes gamble that could devastate the energy sector for years. Globally, energy markets are in chaos. Rising oil and gas prices are squeezing China's economy while hiking costs for US consumers at the pump. Conversely, falling prices could bankrupt American shale firms and weaken Russia, a key Chinese supplier. It's a high-stakes poker game where every player risks ruin, yet no one blinks. OPEC plus nations, watching from the sidelines, may adjust production to stabilize prices, but the uncertainty is paralyzing. The energy sector, once a predictable engine of global growth, is now a geopolitical minefield, with every move sending shockwaves through markets. The broader implications are profound. This trade war is fracturing global supply chains, disrupting everything from manufacturing to food production. Energy, once a neutral commodity, is now a weapon, wielded with precision by both sides. The world is watching, bracing for the next escalation in this economic showdown. The US-China trade war is splitting the world economy in two. China's shift to Canada and Russia could erase the US from energy maps. But it's bigger than oil. This is a fight for global control. Zoom out, and the US-China trade war reveals a world splintering under the weight of rivalry. Energy is a lethal weapon in a multidimensional power struggle, alongside technology, finance, and agriculture. When the US slaps tariffs on Chinese goods, China retaliates by slamming the door on American oil and gas. The 90% drop in US oil exports and near-zero LNG purchases are Beijing's battle cry. We can cripple your strengths. China's strategy is a masterclass in resilience. By minimizing reliance on the US, Beijing is forging a robust supply chain with Canada, Russia, and OPEC plus nations. Canada offers stability, Russia delivers bargains, and Middle Eastern producers fill the gaps. This shift could permanently redraw the global energy map, with Canada and Russia emerging as winners at America's expense. For the US, losing China, a linchpin of global energy demand in the post-pandemic recovery, is a strategic catastrophe with far-reaching consequences. Two futures hang in the balance. In one, the US and China find a fragile truce, easing tariffs and restoring energy trade to a semblance of normalcy. In the other, tensions solidify, and China cements ties with Canada and Russia, leaving the US to scramble for new markets in a crowded field. This path risks fracturing the global economy, unraveling supply chains, and fueling uncertainty through 2027. Populist rhetoric, US voices shouting, "No trade with China," Chinese vows to sever US dependence, drowns out diplomacy, pushing nations toward economic silos. Trump's tariffs are shaking the US auto industry to its core. New 25% tariffs on auto parts could slash 2 million car sales. But it's not just prices spiking. Jobs and innovation are at stake. The trade war's shockwaves aren't limited to energy. They're slamming America's auto industry, a cornerstone of its economy. A coalition of US auto industry groups has sounded the alarm, urging President Trump to reconsider 25% tariffs on imported auto parts. These tariffs, implemented in April 2025, threaten to upend an industry already grappling with high costs and shifting consumer demands. The Center for Automotive Research estimates these tariffs will inflate costs for US automakers by $108 billion in 2025, forcing companies to pass price hikes onto consumers or absorb crippling losses. The math is brutal. New vehicle prices, already averaging $50,000, could rise by thousands, potentially cutting US and Canadian auto sales by 1.8 million vehicles this year. This isn't just about sticker shock, it's about affordability. With interest rates on car loans elevated since the pandemic, consumers are stretched thin, and higher prices could push millions out of the market. Analysts warn of a domino effect. Lower sales mean layoffs, with experts like Sam Abuelsamid from Telemetry predicting job losses as production struggles to shift domestically. Even if some manufacturing moves to the US, it won't offset the damage from reduced demand. The industry's plea is urgent. Companies like Ford and Stellantis have boosted incentives to soften the blow, but these are short-term fixes. The broader impact threatens innovation, particularly in electric vehicles, EVs, where global supply chains are critical. Tariffs could stall EV adoption, undermining America's green ambitions. This is a high-stakes gamble, protecting domestic industry at the cost of economic stability. The auto sector, like energy, is now a trade war battleground, and the fallout could reshape America's industrial heartland. Global energy giants are dodging trade war bullets with bold moves. Australia's Woodside Energy just posted a 13% revenue surge despite tariff threats. But it's not all smooth sailing. Their $1.2 billion US project faces a tariff storm. While the US grapples with lost markets, global energy players like Australia's Woodside Energy are navigating the trade war with agility. Woodside reported a 13% rise in first-quarter revenue in 2025, reaching $3.32 billion, driven by the startup of its Sangomar project in Senegal and strong gas hub-linked prices. This beat analyst expectations of $2.79 billion, boosting shares by up to 3.9%. Despite a 5% quarterly revenue dip due to falling oil prices and disruptions at its Northwest Shelf and Pluto LNG projects, Woodside's resilience highlights the complex interplay of global energy markets amid trade tensions. But tariffs loom large. Woodside is assessing the impact of US tariffs on its $1.2 billion Louisiana LNG project, acquired from Tellurian in 2024. The project, poised to make Woodside a global LNG powerhouse, faces uncertainty as Trump's trade policies pressure international energy investments. The first phase alone could cost $16 billion, and tariffs could inflate costs or deter partners, delaying Woodside's final investment decision expected in Q1 2025. CEO Meg O'Neill remains cautiously optimistic, noting strong interest from potential partners, but the trade war's unpredictability is a wild card. This is a microcosm of the global energy landscape. While China pivots to Canada and Russia, players like Woodside are hedging bets, balancing growth with tariff risks. The trade war's ripple effects are universal, forcing companies to rethink strategies and alliances. Energy markets are no longer just about supply and demand. They're a geopolitical chessboard where every move carries global consequences. The stakes are existential. This trade war isn't just about oil or gas. It's about who controls the arteries of the global economy. Energy, politicized to its core, is no longer a mere resource. It's a battleground where superpowers flex their might. As the world teeters on the edge, the question looms: can cooler heads prevail, or are we witnessing the dawn of a new divided world order? The US-China trade war is a clash of titans, reshaping the world. China's pivot to Canada and Russia is a masterstroke, punishing US tariffs while securing energy. Canada, the unexpected victor, stands to dominate Asian markets, its economy soaring. The US is bleeding, lost market share, struggling exporters, and a tarnished energy superpower status. The true casualty may be the global economy. Trade wars breed chaos, spiking prices, and unraveling supply chains. Energy, a geopolitical cudgel, is no longer just fuel. It's a battleground. As tensions persist into 2025 and beyond, the world braces for the next move. Where do you stand? Will diplomacy prevail, or is this a new energy order? Comment below and subscribe for more deep dives.